Welcome to Justice for All. I'm your host, Porsha Monique, and today we're diving into one of the most high profile cases of the year, the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. After a 6 week federal case filled with explosive testimony and headline making moments, the verdict is in. Joining us now is Jay Wendell Gordon, better known as the Warrior Lawyer. He's a fearless legal mind, a civil rights champion, and courtroom tactician whose voice cuts through the noise with sharp clarity and unmatched insight. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to
Thank
be.
Thank you so much for being here. We definitely appreciate you, your expertise, your opinions. I've been following you on social media, and so it seems that you may have had some insight into how the jury was going to vote. But let's break it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the jury found Diddy not guilty, pretty much, on the most serious charges of racketeering, sex trafficking, and obstruction of justice. However, he was found guilty on two federal counts under the Mann Act, a law that prohibits the transportation of individuals across state lines for sexual activity. Those are important because those convictions carry up to 20 years in prison. Help me break it down.
Well, the transportation for prostitution carries 10 years apiece.
Okay.
And it's unlikely that he's going to get the maximum sentence. This isn't the most egregious uh, case regarding transportation to engage in prostitution. If you recall, he was barely participating in the acts at all. Most of the times, he's off in the corner servicing himself. So, in terms of a sentence, I can't see you doing 20 years for servicing yourself in the corner as two other people engage in sexual activity. And the Mann Act is an act that was established many, many years ago during the Jack Johnson days when Jack Johnson, a former heavyweight prize fighter, first black heavyweight prize fighter, started dating white women. So the Mann Act was enacted to deal with him and his personal affairs with a white woman that he was dating.
Mm,
Nonetheless, Puffy, they got that, and that's a reasonable verdict. I would have found him not guilty of all of the verdicts because
wow.
even though the Mann Act said, even though the transportation uh, charge dealt with Cassie and Jane,
Jane.
who were
Hmm.
the primary persons, I think he was convicted because of the acts of the male as opposed to Jane. And I believe the jury instructions said if you are they guilty of violating the transportation to engage in prostitution because of Cassie and the male as opposed to Cassie
Mm,
or the male. And so
hmm.
if that's how the jury verdict read, where it's in the conjunctive with the and as opposed to the disjunctive with the or,
Yeah.
then I think that was a gimme. I really feel like the verdict was a compromise. I believe
Hmm.
that Puffy could have swept this entire case. I believe
Mm,
that there were many on that jury, perhaps not enough, but at least a large percentage of that jury probably wanted to give Puffy a full flush of the verdict. But
hmm.
I believe that two counts of the prostitution case caused the holdouts to relieve themselves of the
Hmm.
RICO charge because it came so late. Even though they came up with the verdicts before they decided the RICO charge situation, I do believe that maybe they had one as opposed to two because Jane's testimony was incredibly not credible. Cassie's
Mm,
testimony wasn't credible at all, to be honest with you, but
hmm.
everybody got something out of it. The prosecution got something. Puffy certainly got something out of it because he will see the streets again. He won't
Yeah.
do 20 years. I expect maybe he'll do maybe 2 more years home detention or maybe 2 to 3 more years. I say 2 to 5 years at most.
Wow. So you don't see him getting out today. So there was a lot of talk on social media about will he get out of prison today?
I don't know if this decision probably is 521. That decision probably has been made already, and I haven't updated myself.
Mm,
But the judge may decide because he's now been adjudged as being guilty, he may present a greater flight risk today than he did pre-trial before he was found guilty of anything. So the
hmm.
judge may allow him to stay, and if he does stay in, I think they go to sentencing in the next 3 months or so. It's just
Okay.
it's just racking up time served. I do
Mhm.
believe he ought to be able to come home, though. I mean,
Okay.
for the time that he'll probably face, he could probably do it on home detention. They could put him on home confinement now. The big case is no longer a factor. The life imprisonment case, the two 15-year cases, which dealt with sex trafficking, they were 15 years apiece. He got the lesser included offense that he could possibly get, which is the transportation to engage in prostitution. What is that anyway?
Yeah.
You're not. It really doesn't take much. It's almost as if anybody could be found guilty of that when you decide to take your girlfriend to a distant island, weddings or what have you. Now, the
Yeah.
trick of it is that somebody has to be engaged in some kind of illegal. So with
Okay.
that element missing, okay, I see it. So if they're getting paid, to have sex, yeah, that could be prostitution. But I thought what was interesting about this case is that the escorts made it very clear that they were not prostitutes.
Mm.
And so that's why I feel like that verdict was a compromise verdict because,
Yeah.
or they just didn't believe the escorts. But I thought their
Okay.
testimony was very clear that they made that distinction. We are not prostitutes. They get paid to dance, they get paid for their time, they get paid for their performances. And I think that's what Puffy was doing. And that's what the attorney was arguing. People make homegrown pornography every day. And this is part of what Puffy did. They were swingers, and I agree with that. That everybody engaged in the conduct was consenting adults. I agree with that.
Hmm.
But if you do put in the money for sex, that is going to constitute prostitution. So it depends on how you fall.
Yeah.
If you're the fact finder, which way are you going to go? I'm going to definitely use the standard beyond reasonable doubt in every portion of it. I'm just not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed those offenses, but I do believe that if parties got into the room, they're ready to go home, it's 4th of July weekend, they ain't coming back on Monday.
They're not coming
And they
back on
ain't even trying
Monday.
to deal with this on Friday. They're trying to enjoy their
Right.
holidays, just
Right.
get this thing over. So what do
Get
you
it
need?
out the way.
I'm not right. I'm not going to convict them of RICO. So y'all might as well give up the RICO. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Sex trafficking, we're going to go through the elements of that. Okay, that's not there either. I'm not going to convict them of sex trafficking because that involves force, coercion, or fraud.
Hmm.
And none of
Hmm.
those things occurred in this case. If you are honestly judging the facts and the evidence and all the consent that was involved, even the consent, the videotape, and what have you, none of that is involved. So sex trafficking, that was pretty easy too.
Hmm.
RICO to me was easy. Sex trafficking was easy, but when you got 2 counts of sex trafficking, then you got to go to the rest of the RICO elements and
Yeah.
see if they were met. And I believe those elements were definitely the sex trafficking, but I believe that there's more to it. You have to have 2 or more predicate offenses, and then you have to have some kind of engagement or management or operate. I can't remember what it is real quick. You
Okay.
give me a moment, I'll find it. But
Okay. Well, while you look at that, I do want to ask you about the prosecution and their case. Number one, was it a surprise to you that the jury reached a split verdict? And if or if not, what does that say about the prosecution and how they presented their case?
well, the case was ass from the start. It wasn't a good case.
It
I
was
think
what?
it was ass, ASS. They should have not, like, this is so beneath the United States of America to bring a case like this where they're getting inside people's bedrooms and,
Right.
and judging people's lifestyle. I mean, that's what it
Hmm.
comes to. They're judging lifestyles as opposed to ferreting out and prosecuting crime. And so
Right.
I was getting back to the elements of a RICO is the existence of an enterprise, engagement of interstate commerce, and a pattern 2 or more predicate offenses. So I think they were having difficulties trying to determine whether or not this was an enterprise.
Hmm.
But in terms of the split verdict, no, I'm not necessarily surprised at that. I don't necessarily believe that the verdict was split. I believe it was compromise. I believe
Okay.
that parties got together and said, you know what, we're not going to do X, Y. I'll give you Z because I'm not coming back on Monday. There's a thing that's called jury fatigue. They get exhausted, they get
Yeah.
frustrated, they get
Hmm.
annoyed. They
Hmm.
like, I got to go back to work at some point in time. I got kids, I got daycare. This thing has been
A life, right?
and so we got to get back to our regularly scheduled program. And so
Mhm.
I just feel like that the charges that he was found guilty of, they just gave it to him. Now, the prosecution's case, I call it a Karen case because I feel like the victims weren't really victims of the offenses that were charged. Now, is,
Agreed.
is Puffy of morally depraved in some of his conduct? Yes. Is he a woman beater? Yes, and hopefully he'll be able to recover from that. Is his moral calculator or his moral compass off? Definitely.
Mhm, mhm.
However, he did not, that is not a crime. The woman beating, yes, and there were opportunities to bring him to trial or bring him to court to address those instances.
Right.
However, with these federal charges, they're not federal crimes. And I think
Mhm.
that's where this case involves, prosecutorial overreach. I mean, that's what it really amounts to. They
Okay.
overreached on this and they wanted
Yeah.
to put a square peg into a round hole, and quite frankly, it didn't fit. I don't know who they thought was going to buy it, but nobody bought it.
And in that same lane, staying with the prosecution, even still, they brought forth very disturbing testimony, years worth of allegations, but the jury still rejected the racketeering, right? Where do you think that their case faltered? Do you think it was with the evidence? Do you think it was with the witnesses? Or do you think it was how their narrative was framed? Or something different?
All the above, but
All of
primarily with the witnesses. The witnesses just were not credible.
it.
In fact, if I'm sure if Puffy would have known the testimony would have come out the way that it did, he probably wouldn't have paid any of them a dime because they have so much baggage, and Puffy and those had so much evidence with
Hmm.
regard to the text messages and everything else. I mean, if you're not really going after Puffy for the domestic violence, you don't have anything else. And quite
Yeah.
frankly, if I didn't see it on video, I wouldn't even believe it. And based upon the testimony that they were producing, I wouldn't have believed anything,
Yeah.
any of what they said. So it is the video that kept this case alive. And the
Hmm.
video, at the end of the day, really doesn't amount to anything more than domestic violence. It doesn't amount to any racketeering enterprises. It doesn't amount to any sex trafficking, and it doesn't amount to transportation to engage in prostitution, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
a salacious point that keeps people emotionally involved. And that's what I
Correct.
believe the government's entire mantra for the case was to keep them emotionally involved. So make
Hmm.
them feel as if there needs to be some retribution, as if we have to do something about this. And this is
Yeah.
our last opportunity because Puffy may be unrepentant or irredeemable.
Yeah. Now let's talk about Diddy's defense team. What does that say about his caliber of legal representation that they were able to get guilty on the most important charges?
I always say justice is available to everyone the same as the Ritz-Carlton. That's what I say. If you can afford, good legal representation, you're gonna get somewhere. You okay?
Yeah.
But I don't think that they pulled a rabbit out of the hat or anything. They did what any aggressive defense team would do. I mean, you go in on cross-examination. You got the goods because you got the text message. This case wasn't very difficult to defend because
Hmm.
all of the witnesses had flaws. All of them
Yeah.
were flawed because all of them would not resist the lifestyle, the celebrity, the access,
Hmm.
accoutrements that go with being attached to Sean P. Diddy Combs. They weren't trying to give that up. And it turned this into, I don't know if it was a love tale per se, but at least a story of thug passion. That's what I call it, thug passion. When you're in these toxic relationships, it's a lot of passion in those relationships. And I guess the makeup is just as bad as the fights. So, you know,
Yeah.
I just believe that, no, this case should have never been brought.
Okay, and in that same vein, given the mixed verdict, do you think that his legal team overplayed their hand by going to trial instead of negotiating a plea?
Nah, because these weren't going to offer a plea that was worth going for. And if they had a
Okay.
plea that was available, I'm sure he would have taken it. If he could have pled to probation, who cares if Puffy walks around with a sex offense, uh, on his record? Nobody
Yeah.
cares. He's Puffy. Like he's still
Hmm.
got money. He's gonna always have money, and he could put people in front of him to be the face of his businesses, and his businesses are still going to generate income. So no,
Hmm.
I think he did the right thing by going to trial. If they didn't have
Okay.
anything that was worthy of his time, yeah, go to trial. And that takes a lot of courage. You got to have the courage of a burglar to go to trial in federal court, given their win-loss rate. But this
Hmm.
case is just one of those cases that, again, they brought to federal court, which was more or less a state court case. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And probably a state district court case, maybe a Judge Judy case, if you really, if you really want to talk about it, because
Yeah.
the evidence just wasn't there, and they had to know that their witnesses were incredibly flawed. Some of them had to meet with 26 times. I believe somebody was met with 26 times.
Wow.
You have to have an incredibly flawed witness if you have to meet with them 26 times to
Right.
make sure that they're prepared to testify one time in court. I mean,
Hmm.
that's incredible.
That is.
That is incredible.
Now, I want to talk to you about the public perception and the media reaction. So, if you've been watching social media, if you've been tuned into the news, you see clips of people literally dancing in the street. Outside of the courthouse, fans are dousing themselves with baby oil, cheer. Really, really
Yeah,
going on.
that's funny.
How much do you think that these sensational public reactions impact a jury's perception or the court's handling of bail sentencing?
Well, I can tell you that everyone who followed the case was vested. And about midway to almost through the trial, people were picking sides.
Hmm.
And for people to celebrate in the streets, I mean, this case carried the same fervor as the O.J. Simpson case because we felt like this was the white establishment going big game hunting. And
Hmm.
big game was Puffy Combs. It
Yeah.
was a case of character assassination as opposed to bringing him to justice. It's a case of
Hmm.
them trying to buck break a successful black man as opposed to really doing what's right for the United States. Because again, this didn't have to be. They
Yeah.
knew what they had from the very beginning. And I don't know if the U.S. attorney who was in place at the time was trying to make a name for himself or whether
Mm.
he truly believed he had something. But when your case starts to unravel, give it up.
Yeah.
Let it go. Make that offer that you say is that so sweet of a deal that you can't pass it up. Because right now they have to feel like they lost because indeed they did lose. First of all,
Yeah.
he lost the majority of the of charges. Second of all, he got convicted on the lowest possible denominating offense that he could have. And like as I
Hmm.
said, he's not going to spend the rest of his life in jail. He's not going to do 20 years. I don't think he's going to do 10 years. I don't think he's going to do more than 5 years, and he might end up on probation at best, or probation, some kind of home detention, or 2 to 3 years,
Hmm.
some home detention. I don't see much happening to him at this time.
Yeah. Now, before we get out of here, I do want to get your opinion on Cassie. She and the prosecutors have requested that Diddy stays in custody, citing potential risk to victims. How does the legal standard for a pre-sentencing custody decision weigh in her concerns?
Puffy's not interested in Cassie. Cassie indicated that she still loves him. If anything, Puffy might cause disharmony in their relationship because her husband may be upset that he still remains in the community. But Puffy is coming home. Okay?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
he still has love for Cassie. He wished her well. I remember him wishing her well before he was locked up for this offense. So
Wow.
I think all of that is hyperbole. All of it is an exaggeration by the prosecution, as the entire case has been an exaggeration. And at some point in time, the judge should be able to decide for himself. Now, a lot of times they're going to go with what the prosecution says because that's just how court goes. Prosecution normally gets whatever they want for the most part. But I
Hmm.
don't think Puffy should continue to remain incarcerated, especially given the verdict in this case and what the potential sentence is. And then he's not looking at maximum penalty. It's not like this is his second, third, or fourth offense of transportation to engage in
Right.
prostitution. This is his very first offense. I don't think he has anything else on his record. I don't. And
Yeah.
so how much time are you going to give him a person with nothing on their record or a minimal record and nothing like this on their record? And I
Yeah.
think there's going to be a lot of community folks who are going to come out and speak to the judge, talk about how good he was. I remember hearing during the trial that he has opened a lot of doors for Black women to break the glass ceiling in the music industry. So he's done a lot of bad, but he's also done a lot of good. And I expect those who he's done a lot of good for will show up for him and provide
Yeah.
character references. And I think it's going to be the hearing is going to be just as exciting as the actual trial because people are going to really come out and support him.
Yeah, and we've seen that across social media, across the news, that people are really in support of him and him getting acquitted on the most serious charges. Now,
Mhm.
last question for you. Beyond this trial, Diddy still faces dozens of civil lawsuits stretching back decades, right? How do
Mhm.
the criminal convictions strengthen and or weaken those pending cases?
The testimony and the evidence weakened those cases. I said earlier in discussion, if Puffy would have known what the testimony was going to be before this trial, he probably wouldn't have settled any of those cases. I wouldn't have settled any of those cases. I would have fought them tooth and nail all the way through. I think the gravy train is left. I think now Puffy, all he needs to do now is just dig in. None of those suits have any merit, even though it's a lower standard when you're in civil court. The standard is not beyond reasonable doubt, which is way up here. It's a lower standard that is preponderance of the evidence. But you have the testimony of Cassie. When you talk about consent, when you talk about coercion, and are you really going to believe that these women were battered? They waited all these years. They waited till Cassie gets her little money and some other lady gets their little money, and now they're bringing their suits. I would try all of those cases. I don't think any of those folks have credibility, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
No. I think it's a money grab, and they're trying to get the last little morsel, squeeze last little morsels out of Puffy before he shuts it all down completely. But I think he should shut it down right now.
Last little morsels. Okay.
Yeah, the last little juice that they could get out of him, whatever he's got left, they want. But you know, they're a bunch of.
Yeah. Well, I love it. We appreciate you for stopping by, Justice for All. Powerful insight as always. This case continues to ripple through courtroom as well as the culture. One thing is clear, the verdict is just the beginning. Thank you for breaking it down with clarity and conviction. We will be watching closely as sentencing unfolds. And of course, we have to have you back.
Please, I'd be happy to come back. Thank you
so much. Take care.